So, who is my favorite player on this year's Bearcats football team? Spoiler alert, it's not Evan Prater.
Are Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, sir. Happy 4th of July, America's birthday, and welcome to Bearcats podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen or watch of every day. My name is Alex Frank, your host each and every day, former sports director of UC's student-run media organization, Bearcast Media, bringing all of those experiences here to the Locked On Bearcats podcast. So, to answer the question of who my favorite player is on this year's Bearcats football team, Desean Pace. Now, Desean Pace may not be the first player you think about when it comes to this year's team, but he should be. Desean Pace has the potential this year. Sorry, as I adjust my screen. Desean Pace has the potential this year. My screen, if you're watching on YouTube, that's what I meant. Desean Pace this year has the opportunity to not only ascend to top of the conference tier. I'm talking first team all AAC. I'm also talking about the opportunity to become one of the best linebackers in the entire country. That's how good this guy is. Desean Pace is this year's leading returning tackler from last year's team. He has a nose for the football. He's looking to make plays. And on a position where, let's be honest, is the linebacker position selling tickets to games? No, not in today's game. 15, 20 years ago, yeah, I probably would. Not today, though. Quarterbacks, running backs, corners, they're selling tickets. But linebackers are still pretty damn important to the football team. Linebackers back up the defensive line. Linebackers, it's in the name itself. Linebackers. They're backing up the defensive line. Desean Pace is that. Look, linebackers aren't as big as they used to be, but that's okay because they can do more things. They can, drop back deep into coverage. They can rush the quarterback. They can range from side to side, kind of like you saw with Perry Young when he was here. That's who Desean Pace is. And it's so amazing to me how you go from a guy like Perry Young to Pace. And I just think about, remember when Luke Fickell said, this was a press conference in 2020, fall camp when it was virtual, and he said in the very first press conference of fall camp at Higher Ground, he said Desean Pace doesn't have an ounce of fear in his body. And when you hear something like that, you instantly gravitate towards that player. At least for me. When I heard that, I'm like, whoa, this guy's going to be good. I hope he sees the field. Because, some freshmen, a lot of true freshmen, redshirt freshmen on this team outside of Desmond Ridder and Sauce Gardner, you really don't see them a whole lot. And here you have all these great recruits that have come from the state of Cincinnati, as Luke Fickell calls it, and they've yet to really see a lot of action. But Desean Pace last year not only settled into his role, but he excelled. 4 interceptions. I think he had 95 tackles. I think that's the correct number. 95 tackles. And just an energy to this team. When you think about a Cincinnati kid who had immense success at Colerain High School, who's a playmaker, he's your leading returning tackler from last year on a team whose defense, who, let's be honest, yes, they return a lot of key pieces. There's a lot of unfamiliarity with it. If there's anybody who embodies, though, being a Bearcat to me in this era, it's Desean Pace. What's unique is, again, linebackers are not a position that sells tickets, but you are going to come to know Desean Pace very well. You are going to, he might become your favorite player like he is. The thing about linebackers is, what do they do that excites you? 15, 20 years ago, Ray Lewis, Brian Urlacher, Terrell Suggs, Bart Scott maybe, those were players who sold tickets, right? The reason why fans were in the stands was because you had these big, physical, able-bodied gladiator linebackers, right? That's not today's college football, or the NFL for that matter. You can think of any great linebacker of the last 15 to 20 years in college football. LeVar Arrington, for instance. put fans in the stands at Happy Valley in Penn State, or any other great linebacker that's come through college football, D'Amico Ryans at Wake Forest, for example. But it feels like now linebackers are an afterthought, but yet they're still so important to the team. Desean Pace will be a reason why fans are showing up to games this year. And why he's my favorite player? Well, first off, he hails from Cincinnati, right? It's one thing when, I'm kind of teasing the next segment here, it's one thing when you have a great player like Sauce and Desmond Ridder, but they didn't hail directly from Cincinnati. In Cincinnati, where high school football is a commodity, a way of life on Friday nights in the community, when you have a player at the caliber of Desean Pace, who plays at one of the most successful public schools, public high school football programs in the state in Coleraine, let alone the city of Cincinnati, the whole damn state of Ohio. When you have someone like that, who then goes and commits to his hometown team, that makes him that much more, it makes you want to root for him that much more. It makes him that much more of a fan favorite, and it does to me. And you look at what he did last year, the big interception to ice the game in Indiana, the interception to get things going against Notre Dame, and he added an interception against UCF. He added another interception, I believe, against South Florida. I could be wrong. It was either South Florida or Navy, but he added another interception. It's not like this guy was just there. He was making plays, and he was, creating tackles. Like, we all remember what Sauce Gardner did last year because he was a first-round draft pick. We all remember Kobe Bryant because he was an All-American and the Jim Thorpe Award winner, right? We remember those players. We remember the freak that Myjai Sanders is. But lost in all of that. But what's going to become more to the surface this year, and what's going to be the star of this defense, again, in an era where the linebackers really aren't what's selling tickets and bringing fans to the games, what is going to sell tickets is Desean Pace and his playmaking abilities. This guy's my favorite player. Like, how much I embellished on Evan Prater throughout May and the early part of June. But I don't know if Evan Prater is going to be the quarterback. And do I want my favorite player to be the backup quarterback if he doesn't start? No disrespect to Evan Prater. But at the end of the day, the more I've talked about Pace, I put him in my 7 players who will define 2022. I put him in the 7 players facing the most pressure entering 2022. Now he's becoming my favorite player because I look at him and I see what he did last year and I see the potential this year. Phil Steele's got him second team All-American, not All-American Athletic Conference, All-American point blank and the period. I look at all that combined with what he did last year and the fact that he hails from the Queen City, and that is why, ladies and gentlemen, people of Cincinnati, he is my favorite Cincinnati Bearcats football player entering 2022. By the way, did I mention, you can subscribe to the Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel, currently at 249 subscribers and counting. Follow us to get an alert every time we drop a new episode, like today on 4th of July, America's birthday, and the great American city in Cincinnati. After all, the city is home to the first professional baseball team, baseball is considered America's pastime. Coming up, so if Evan Prater's the best offensive recruit in Bearcats history, then Desean Pace might be the best defensive recruit in Bearcats history. I'll explain next, but first a word from our partners at betonline.net, your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. You can find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL Stanley Cup Final, which just concluded. Congratulations once again to the Colorado Avalanche and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for sporting wagering information, including live betting, the playoffs, esports and scores, and BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So I've talked about extensively about Evan Prater. And that was back in May and the month of June. But the main reason why Desean Pace is my favorite player. Let me rephrase the question that I teased at the end of segment 1. So I said if Evan Prater is the best offensive recruit in Bearcats football history, which he might turn out to be, then is Desean Pace certainly the best defensive recruit in Bearcats history. Now, some would say Sauce Gardner. Well, Sauce Gardner wasn't highly recruited out of Detroit. Desean Pace. So if we compare the recruitments of Desean Pace and Sauce Gardner, I think that the better question is, and the more I think about it, the better question is Desean Pace the best defensive recruit from the Cincinnati area? And I think no doubt he can be. I think given his success in high school, you look at him coming out of Colerain High School. Desean Pace was a 3-star recruit, part of 3 conference championships, high school defensive back who projected to play at strong-sided linebacker sniper position, filling in for a guy like Brian Wright, 3-time first-team all-conference, first-team all-Ohio, first-team all-Southwest District, yada, yada, yada. 47 tackles, 3 interceptions, forced fumble during his campaign. And some players, like a Desean Pace, they get better and better after they're recruited out of high school. So you look at a guy like him, compare that to Sauce Gardner coming out of Detroit. And again, Sauce wasn't an immediate starter, but you saw quickly how good he was going to be. If you're going to argue the question that I just posed of Desean Pace being the best defensive recruit in Bearcats football history with Sauce Gardner, that's fine, because we know Sauce Gardner had immense success. But as far as players from Cincinnati, I don't see anybody, at least that I know of, coming near Desean Pace. I was asked about Derek Wolfe, but he is from Lisbon, Ohio, which I don't believe is in the Cincinnati area. Now, Derek Wolfe was a fantastic player, don't get me wrong. So Sauce Gardner, just for the record, coming out of high school, consensus 3-star prospect, won a Division III state championship in Michigan in 2018. Also played a little bit of receiver, first-team All-State at defensive back, first-team All-State by the Detroit News. So kind of similar prospects, Pace and Gardner. But to me, there have been so many players that have come out of the state of Cincinnati in the Fickle era. Pace might be the best defensive recruit. Think about what he's already achieved. Think about how good he can be. He's got another year left in him, maybe 2. And by the way, that second year will be in the Big 12. I mean, if Phil Steele is projecting him as a second-team All-American, I mean, think about the sky, and not only that being the limit, but like, is this guy going to be an All-American? Is this guy going to be a contender for the Chuck Bednarik Award, which is given to the best linebacker? And I'm sorry, the Dick Butkus Award given to the best linebacker in college football? I mean, there is a lot of potential within this guy. And again, we remember Sauce, we remember Desmond Ridder, and those two are in a class by themselves. But Desean Pace is so unique because he hails from the Queen City. He has an opportunity to create a legacy of his own as someone who hails from around here, comes from a powerhouse in Colerain. When we think of high schools in this city, what comes to mind? Yeah, St. X, Elder, Moeller, and LaSalle, but then outside of that, I'm going to Colerain. I'm going to, Roger Bacon, which yes is private. You think of a lot of private schools, but you also think of Colerain because of the success they've had. Lakota West is up there. Any school in the GMC, the Great Midwest, now I'm confusing myself. How do I not remember the actual name of the GMC? Anyway, you get it. You get the point. That conference is pretty good in football, and it's produced some great players. A lot of those players have come to Cincinnati. Desean Pace is one of them. And when you have a hometown player doing great things, remember Tony Pike hailed from Reading High School, you could root for him easily because you knew he was from Cincinnati. He felt like one of you. He felt like one of your own. That's what Desean Pace feels like. And Desmond Ridder didn't grow up too far from Cincinnati. Hails from Louisville, which is, practically in the back. I mean, it's just over 100 miles. So it felt like he was one of us. But when you have a player that hails directly from the city, who has lived in the city his entire life, who played high school football in Cincinnati under the Friday night lights of Coleraine High School, and there were many big games. I remember I saw Desean Pace play in a game. When I interned for WLWT and was a part of their Blitz 5 Friday night football coverage in the fall of 2019, I saw firsthand what Desean Pace could do. I saw Coleraine play. And coming to Cincinnati, you knew that guy had the opportunity and the potential to be a really good player. And last year he did. And he's become this incredible standout linebacker. And now that you know, if you didn't already, that he played defensive back in high school, now you see why he's such a good playmaker. Because he can track the ball well. He has great range. It's not like he's just there to cover a tight end or back up the defensive, the run, whatever. No, he's looking to make plays. He's looking to make plays to help the team win. And his 4 interceptions last year were high-impact interceptions. It's amazing how he goes from not really, you look at how far he has come since he came to Cincinnati. 2020 really didn't know him all that well because Cincinnati had some really good linebackers on that team, led, of course, by Jarrell White. But I look at this year's roster, if I can get to it, and, hang on. And I remember, when Desean Pace had that interception last year against Indiana, I'm like, haven't really heard from him much. And then he has another interception in Notre Dame, and you say, all right, this guy is going to be a really good player. He just got better and better and better as the season wore on. 2020, played in 8 games, 7 tackles, forced fumble, 4 tackles on 2 occasions. That's all fine and dandy. 6th in the conference last year, 3rd on the team with 94 tackles. I said 95. Also added 9 for a loss, team high 4 interceptions. Had a field goal block in Navy at the end of the first half that set up a go-ahead field goal for Cincinnati. I don't know if people remember that, but that was a huge play in a game that was way closer than any of us wanted it to be. And imagine if Desean Pace continues this upward ascension. Imagine if he goes on to becoming a high draft pick. And in the end, it all goes back to that he hails from Cincinnati. And when you ask me why he's my favorite player, that's the first reason I go to. Because he hails from the Queen City. Because he feels like one of us. It's pretty cool. Up next, Desean Pace, as I maybe already mentioned, isn't the only linebacker hailing from Cincinnati on this year's roster. And this group could really be the group that puts UC's recruiting philosophy into fruition. I'll explain after a word from 2 of our sponsors. 7 of the 13 linebackers, there are 13 linebackers on this year's roster. 7 of the 13 hail from Cincinnati. They are homegrown players. You go down the list of linebackers, and you will see a bunch of Cincinnati players. If we go on down the list, you see Cam Jr., Middletown. Ivan Pace, Sean Pace's brother, Cincinnati, or Coleraine. Brody Engel, LaSalle. Desean Pace, Coleraine. David Jones Jr., Lakota West. Houston. Jack Haglage, Mason, transfer from the Naval Academy. And then those are 7 players who hail from Cincinnati. That's impressive. So when we talk about this season being about showing that Cincinnati is, what they've done in recruiting, is immensely successful. This group has the potential to show that. Because you look at those players, haven't really seen a lot from David Jones and Jaheim Thomas, and we remember when those guys committed. Those were huge commits at the time. We know Evan Pace from his time in Miami. Last year for the Redhawks, was the Mid-American Defensive Player of the Year from Pro Football Focus. First team All-MAC, led the conference, 125 tackles, NCAA record tying 6 sacks in a win over Akron in 2019. I mean, this is so you think about what Desean's done. Now add his older brother to the team, in Ivan. This linebacking core is going to be pretty darn good. If there's any group that can put the recruiting into fruition, it's this one. Like when you think of Bearcats, right? Tough, physical, nasty. That's the kind of player I think of. Hailing from the hotbed of Cincinnati high school football. That's what I think of when I think of Bearcats. That way, when the Bearcats program first became relevant in the late 2000s, it is that way now. And by the way, it's here to stay. You think of Luke Fickell and the kind of player that he wants on his team. You think of a player who is driven through the trenches. You think about a player who is, you think about a player who's tough, who's big. It's just, all about football, physicality, in the trenches, ready to do the dirty work, ready to rip someone's head off. That's the kind of player Luke Fickell's trying to get. And I look at this linebacking group and I say to myself, there's just oozing potential everywhere. We know who Desean is. We know what Wilson Huber can bring, sixth-year player. We know what Evan Pace is going to bring from the Mid-American Conference. Now, jumping from the Mid-American to the American is significant, as Russ Heltman, my colleague at All Bearcats, would tell you. But at the same time, he hails from Coleraine. He's known Desean his whole life. I mean, those guys are going to be in lockstep by the time the season rolls around. If we did a list of the seven most impactful newcomers, I think Evan Pace would be on that list. I truly do. Because he just has a pedigree, he has the experience, and I think he knows a little bit about Bearcats football. I'm not sure if he was recruited by Cincinnati. His bio on Go Bearcats doesn't mention that, but I think he knows a little bit. He's probably talked with Desean about the system, right? So this should be, I don't want to say a seamless transition, but it shouldn't be that difficult of a transition. You look at guys who've been here for a while, and then you look at Pace and Huber leading the way, Desean Pace. But the door is wide open for anyone. David Jones, Jaheim Thomas. Remember when Jaheim Thomas committed? And we thought that was the best defensive commit in Bearcats football history as far as recruiting? Desean Pace, has kind of taken that over. But Jaheim could, break out this year. You look at the departures of a guy like Joe DeBlanco, and you look at guys who've departed over the years like Perry Young and Jarrell White, and you see the potential of guys like Jaheim Thomas and David Jones and Ty Van Fossen, who's going to have a larger role this season, and other guys like Brody Engel and Jackson Brucinelli, and maybe guys like Ryan Royer and Devin Hightower. You look at the linebackers, interesting fact, only 1, 2, 3 hail from outside of Ohio. Wilson Huber, who we know what he is. Jack Dingle from Louisville, again, not far down the road, went to Trinity High School. And Jackson Brucinelli hailing from Chicago. These are all Midwestern players. These are all players who are Midwestern born and bred. And those are the kind of recruits you want to see in Cincinnati. But you talk about recruiting philosophy of targeting the state of Cincinnati and the Midwest and the 300-mile radius, so to speak. This is the group that can really put that philosophy into full motion. Because this is the year where you have to prove what you've done in recruiting is incredible. We think it is because of the caliber of players we've gotten in Cincinnati. But those players have to show it on the field. And this linebacking group, 7 of the players hailing from Cincinnati of the 13, which is over half for you math wizards out there. That's why this group has the potential to be that. Put the stamp on the program. It's obviously driven through the trenches. But when we talk about what needs to happen this year for the Bearcats to be a success, remember on Friday I said the 12 things that need to happen before the Bearcats move into the Big 12? This is one of them. Your recruits have to hit. And a lot of these recruits at the linebacker position, and that's going to be the theme this week, linebackers, a lot of the players at this position are Cincinnati recruits. And that makes them easy to root for. It makes it easy rooting for a guy like Desean Pace. And now his brother's in town, in Ivan. And we know he had great success in Miami, which may not say much, I know, because Cincinnati has whooped Miami's tails for the last 15, 20 years. And will again this year. But it's still really cool to have a pair of brothers who hail from Cincinnati on your team, who are going to be potentially All-Americans, who are going to be, Desean for sure, potentially an All-American. And then who knows as far as the NFL draft is concerned. There is oodles of reasons and potential to be excited about this team and its linebackers. And I know I am. All right, coming up tomorrow, Bold Prediction Tuesday, the linebackers. These are going to be bold. And by the way, I know I've gone really bold, maybe more the ambitious route, but if Phil Steele is making a bold prediction that Desean Pace is going to be second-team All-American after only being honorable mention in the American Conference last year, I don't think I'm the only one being bold and ambitious at the same time. One of the best college football writers is as well, which makes me feel good. And maybe it does you too. Efforting John Garcia Jr., hopefully to have him back on this week. What a great conversation that was with him last week. Talking about the linebackers on this year's Bearcats team. We'll talk about linebackers in the recruiting cycle. We'll talk about his thoughts on when these players were recruited coming out of high school, obviously the Cincinnati area. That's going to be a fun show because John can really zone in on Cincinnati recruiting, what makes these great linebackers that come from Cincinnati so great, the programs that they come from. Also efforting potentially Mo Egger on the show. I've wanted to get him on for a long time because if there's any man who has a lot of knowledge on the Bearcats, it's that man. Proud to call him my sports talk show hosting mentor. Hopefully to have him on this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel, which at last check up to 249 subscribers and counting. Don't forget to follow us too so you can get an alert every time we drop a new episode. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Locked On Bearcats, your first listen every day. Now, make your second listen Locked On Big 12, which is your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, hosted by my good friend Josh Ney. He will go through, along with the local experts, the big news across the conference in 30 minutes. Locked On Big 12, your second listen. And by the way, the Big 12 and conference realignment starting up once again, and it is going to be a roller coaster. USC and UCLA going to the Big 10. Every conference, it feels like it's going to be coast to coast by maybe 2025 at this point. Who knows? But I read in The Athletic last night from Sam Kahn Jr., Max Olson, and Justin Williams, potentially the Big 12 could reach out to schools like Utah, Colorado, Arizona State. I'd be all in on that. Imagine that basketball conference. Imagine that football conference too. Just book all my travel plans already, and I'll see you there too. Have a great 4th of July. Have a great grill out tonight. Please stay safe wherever you're celebrating 4th of July tonight so you can make Locked On Bearcats your first listen tomorrow when we give our 5 bold predictions on the linebackers heading into the 2022 season. Until then, for the Locked On Bearcats podcast, I'm Alex Frank. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you. Have a great 4th of July, and I will talk to you tomorrow.